A racist millionaire mocks an elderly black nanny while taking a call, not knowing she raised him. Serafina. Sarah Reyes had always found solace in the rhythm of her daily routine. At 72, she had spent decades nurturing the children of affluent families, her gentle hands guiding them through their formative years. Today, she sat in a quaint cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries, as she prepared for a meeting with a potential new employer. The cafe was a familiar haunt, a place where she had shared countless stories and laughter with the children she had cared for. As she settled into her corner table, Sarah felt a mix of hope and anxiety. She had recently lost her long-term position with a family that had moved out of state, and the prospect of finding new work at her age was daunting. She glanced around the cafe, taking in the vibrant atmosphere filled with chatter and laughter. It was a world that often felt distant from her own, a world where privilege and wealth shielded people from the harsh realities of life. But her moment of peace was abruptly shattered when a loud, obnoxious voice cut through the air. Sarah turned her head to see Adrian Vance, a millionaire known for his brash demeanor and thinly veiled racism, seated at a nearby table. He was animatedly speaking on his phone, his laughter echoing through the cafe like a taunt. These people think they can just waltz into our neighborhoods and demand respect. It's laughable. Adrian's voice dripped with disdain, and Sarah felt her heart sink. She had heard stories about him, had even seen him at charity events, but she never imagined she would be in the same room as him, listening to his vitriol. Sarah's grip tightened around her coffee cup as she strained to hear more of his conversation. I mean, who do they think they are? I'd never let someone like that near my kids. His companions laughed, egging him on, and Sarah felt the familiar sting of indignation rise within her. It wasn't just that he was mocking her community. It felt personal. Did he even know how many lives he affected with his arrogance? The cafe, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. Sarah's mind raced as she grappled with her emotions. She had spent her life caring for children, instilling values of kindness and respect. Yet here was a man who embodied everything she had fought against. The dilemma weighed heavily on her. Should she confront Adrian, exposing him for the racist he was, or let it slide and maintain her dignity? As she sat there, the memories flooded back, memories of the children she had raised, including Adrian himself. She had been there for him during his formative years, teaching him right from wrong, instilling in him the values of compassion and understanding. But now he was a stranger, a man who had forgotten the lessons she had imparted. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of other patrons on her, some glancing curiously at Adrian, others at her. The cafe was a microcosm of society, a place where different classes and races intersected, and she felt the weight of that reality pressing down on her. "You're better than this, Sarah," she whispered to herself, her resolve hardening. She had always been a fighter, and she refused to let Adrian's words go unchallenged. With a determined nod, she rose from her seat, her heart racing as she approached his table. Adrian was still engrossed in his conversation, oblivious to her presence. Sarah cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Excuse me, Adrian," she said, her tone firm but calm. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "What do you want?" he snapped, irritation evident in his voice. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," Sarah replied, her heart pounding, "and I think it's time someone reminded you of the values you were taught." Adrian's expression shifted from surprise to disdain. "And who do you think you are?" he retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Some old nanny trying to lecture me?" Sarah felt a surge of anger but held her ground. "I am the woman who raised you, Adrian. I taught you how to be kind, how to treat others with respect. You've forgotten that." The cafe fell silent, the tension palpable as patrons turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation. Adrian's bravado faltered for a moment, and Sarah seized the opportunity. "You may have money and power, but that doesn't give you the right to belittle others. You've lost sight of what truly matters." Adrian's face flushed with anger, but Sarah could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You don't know anything about me," he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know you," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "I know the boy who used to laugh and play, who learned from me the importance of compassion. You've let your wealth blind you to the truth. The cafe patrons began to murmur, some nodding in agreement with Sarah's words. Adrian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the laughter from earlier replaced by an awkward silence. "You think you can just come here and shame me?" he challenged, but Sarah could see the cracks in his facade. "I'm not here to shame you, Adrian. I'm here to remind you of who you are," Sarah said, her voice rising with passion. "You have the power to change, to be better, but you have to want it." For a moment, Adrian looked lost, as if he were grappling with the weight of his own choices. The laughter and mockery that had once filled the cafe now felt distant, replaced by a profound silence. Sarah took a step back, her heart racing. She had confronted a man who had once been a child in her care, a child she had nurtured and loved. And now she was standing before him, challenging him to remember the values she had instilled in him. As she turned to leave, she felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her dignity. The cafe patrons began to applaud, a wave of support washing over her. Adrian sat in stunned silence, the weight of Sarah's words hanging in the air. She had not only confronted him, but had also sparked a moment of reflection that could change the course of his life. As Sarah walked out of the cafe, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had stood up for herself and her community, and in doing so, she had reminded Adrian of the person he once was. The world outside felt brighter, and she knew that her journey was far from over. As the cafe manager continued to address Sarah, Alani felt a mix of relief and lingering frustration. She had taken a stand, and while the immediate confrontation had been resolved, the underlying issues were far from over. The cafe's atmosphere was still charged with tension, and she knew that Adrian's behavior was a reflection of a broader societal problem. Sarah turned her focus back to her colleagues, who were whispering among themselves, clearly concerned about the situation. "We should probably continue with our meeting," Sarah suggested, hoping to redirect their attention. "We have a lot to cover." "Right," Kai replied, though his voice was still tinged with uncertainty. "But are you okay? That was really intense." Sarah nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just frustrated. It's tiring to keep having to deal with this kind of ignorance." She glanced back at Adrian, who was now standing at the counter, his arms crossed defiantly. The businessman's expression was a mix of anger and embarrassment, and Sarah could only imagine the thoughts racing through his mind. "You handled it like a pro," Zara, another colleague, chimed in. "I wouldn't have been able to keep my cool." Sarah appreciated the support, but her mind was still swirling. She had always been the one to advocate for herself and others, but the weight of it all felt heavy today. It wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever faced prejudice or disrespect. She wanted to create change, but how much could one person do? Taking a deep breath, Sarah opened her laptop, pulling up the marketing strategy they had been working on. "Let's get back to business," she said, trying to push aside the lingering tension. "We need to finalize the campaign for the upcoming product launch." As the discussion shifted back to work, Sarah found herself focusing on the task at hand. They brainstormed ideas, tossing around marketing slogans and strategies. The energy in the room began to shift, and Sarah felt the camaraderie return. They were a strong team, and together they could accomplish great things. But every so often, Sarah's gaze would drift to Adrian, who was now taking orders at another table. The businessman was chatting with a group of customers, his demeanor a stark contrast to what Sarah had just witnessed. It was as if the incident had never happened, as if Adrian could compartmentalize his behavior and move on without consequence. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was part of a larger pattern. After about 30 minutes, Sarah's focus shifted again as she noticed a commotion at the front of the cafe. A group of customers had gathered, and Sarah could hear snippets of conversation about the incident. The cafe was known for its community-first philosophy, and word of Adrian's behavior had begun to spread. "I can't believe he said that," one customer exclaimed. "That's so unprofessional." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for the patrons who were speaking out. It was heartening to see people rallying against prejudice, even if they were strangers. She hoped that this moment would inspire a broader conversation about respect and inclusivity. Just then, the cafe manager approached Sarah's table, his expression serious but supportive. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you for standing up for yourself. It takes courage to confront that type of behavior." "Thank you," Sarah replied, grateful for his acknowledgement. "I just want to make sure everyone feels welcome here." "That's the spirit," he said, nodding. "We're looking to implement some training for our staff to address issues like this. It's important that everyone understands the impact of their words." Sarah felt a rush of relief. "That's a great idea. I think it's crucial for places like this to foster a culture of respect." The manager smiled. "Exactly. We want to be part of the solution, not the problem. And if you're willing, I'd love for you to be involved in the training sessions. Your perspective would be invaluable." Sarah blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected that offer, but it resonated deeply with her desire to create change. "I'd be honored to help," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "I believe it's important for all voices to be heard." As the manager walked away, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was her chance to make a real difference, not just for herself, but for others who had faced similar situations. The cafe could become a beacon of inclusivity, and she wanted to be a part of that journey. The meeting continued, and Sarah found herself more engaged than ever. They discussed strategies and creative ideas, the earlier tension dissipating as they worked together. Laughter filled the air as her colleagues shared anecdotes and brainstormed catchy slogans. For a moment, Sarah felt a sense of normalcy return. But just as things seemed to settle, Adrian approached their table again, this time with a more cautious demeanor. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what I said earlier," he said, his tone lacking its previous bravado. "I didn't mean to offend you." Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden shift. "Apology accepted," she replied, though she couldn't help but feel skeptical. "But it's important to understand why those comments are hurtful." Adrian nodded, his expression unreadable. "I get that now. I guess I let my insecurities get the better of me." Sarah felt a flicker of empathy. "We all have our moments, Adrian, but it's how we choose to respond that defines us." After a brief, awkward silence, Adrian muttered an acknowledgement before walking away, leaving Sarah and her colleagues in stunned silence. "Did that just happen?" Kai asked, clearly taken aback. "I think he's starting to realize how his behavior affects others," Sarah said, contemplating Adrian's words. "It's a step, albeit a small one." The group resumed their discussion, but Sarah felt her mind racing. Had Adrian genuinely changed, or was this just a superficial attempt to placate her? It was hard to say, but Sarah knew that change didn't happen overnight. She hoped that this moment would spark something deeper, both for Adrian and for the cafe as a whole. As the meeting wrapped up, Sarah felt a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had opened the door for dialogue. Perhaps Adrian's apology was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for everyone in the cafe. After finishing their meal and finalizing their plans, Sarah and her colleagues stood to leave. As she walked toward the door, she paused to look back at the cafe. It was a vibrant space filled with potential, and she was determined that it would remain a place where everyone felt accepted and valued. "Let's make it a point to come back soon," Sarah said to her colleagues. "We can support the cafe and continue this conversation." They all nodded in agreement, and Sarah felt a sense of hope wash over her. Change was possible, but it required effort and conversation. She walked out of the cafe with her head held high, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Serafina. Sarah Reyes woke up the next morning with the sun streaming through her window, illuminating her modest living room. The warmth felt like a promise, a reminder that change was possible. After the confrontation with Adrian Vance at the cafe, Sarah had allowed herself a rare moment of hope. She had taken a stand, and now she was determined to see where this newfound courage could lead. As she prepared breakfast, Sarah reflected on the cafe meeting and the manager's proposal for staff training. The thought of sharing her experiences and helping others understand the impact of their words filled her with a sense of purpose. She had spent her life caring for children, instilling values of kindness and empathy, and now she had the chance to extend that influence to a broader audience. Sarah finished her meal and grabbed her phone, scrolling through messages and emails. Her heart sank when she saw an email from her daughter. It was a routine check-in, but the subject line read, "Need to talk." Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. There had been tension between them lately, primarily due to her daughter's concerns about Sarah's age and her ability to keep up with the demands of her job. "Not today," Sarah muttered to herself, deciding to respond later. She needed to focus on the day ahead. With a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door, ready to take on the world. Arriving at the cafe, Sarah felt a familiar mix of excitement and anxiety. The cafe was already bustling with activity, and as she walked in, she spotted her colleagues gathered around a table. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, and Sarah felt a sense of belonging wash over her. "Hey, Sarah," Kai called out, waving her over. "We were just discussing the training sessions. Are you ready to lead the first one?" Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "Absolutely. I think it's important we address these issues head-on." "I agree," Zara added, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "We can make a real difference here." As they huddled around the table, Sarah felt a surge of inspiration. She had always been a storyteller, using her experiences to teach important lessons. Now she could share those stories with a wider audience, potentially changing hearts and minds. "I was thinking we could start with some role-playing exercises," she suggested. "It might help the staff understand how their words can affect others." The group nodded in agreement, and for the next hour, they brainstormed ideas for the training sessions. They discussed potential scenarios, using humor and empathy to create a supportive environment. The energy in the room was palpable, and Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Just then, the cafe manager approached their table, his expression serious. "Sarah, can I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah's heart sank. Had something gone wrong? She followed him to a quieter corner of the cafe, her mind racing with possibilities. "I wanted to talk to you about Adrian," the manager said, his tone measured. "He's been reaching out to me since your confrontation. He wants to apologize and discuss the training sessions." Sarah's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Really? He wants to be involved?" "Yes, but I want to make sure you're comfortable with it," the manager replied. "I know how hurtful his comments were, and I don't want to put you in a position where you feel uncomfortable." Sarah took a moment to process his words. Part of her wanted to dismiss Adrian entirely. After all, his remarks had cut deep. But another part of her recognized that change was often uncomfortable. And if Adrian was genuinely seeking to learn, perhaps this was an opportunity for growth, for both of them. "I'll consider it," Sarah said finally, "but I want to ensure that he understands the gravity of his actions." The manager nodded, appreciating her thoughtfulness. "I'll set up a meeting, and we can see where it goes from there." As Sarah returned to her colleagues, she felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. The possibility of working with Adrian stirred up memories of her past, memories of a time when she had nurtured him as a child, teaching him valuable lessons about kindness and respect. The training session planning continued, and Sarah found herself immersed in the discussions. They decided to structure the sessions around storytelling, allowing staff members to share their own experiences and the lessons they had learned. Sarah felt invigorated as they crafted the framework for the training, envisioning the impact it could have on the cafe and the community. The day flew by, and before she knew it, Sarah was heading home. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden hue over the city. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but the earlier conversation with her daughter still lingered in her mind. Once home, Sarah decided it was time to address the email. She opened her laptop and began typing a response, carefully choosing her words. "Dear Maya, I saw your email and wanted to let you know I'm okay. I understand your concerns, but I'm doing well. I have some exciting things happening at work, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. Let's talk soon." With a sigh, she hit send. Sarah knew Maya meant well, but she didn't want her daughter to worry. She had spent years caring for others, and now she was determined to take control of her own life, embracing the opportunities that came her way. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. It was a message from the cafe manager. "Adrian wants to meet today at noon. Are you ready?" Her stomach churned at the thought of facing him again. Was she really prepared to engage with someone who had caused her so much pain? After a moment of hesitation, she replied, "Yes, I'll be there." As noon approached, Sarah found herself pacing in her apartment, uncertainty gnawing at her. She had faced many challenges in her life, but this felt different. This was an opportunity to confront the man who had belittled her, to challenge the racism that still permeated society. But could she do it without letting her emotions overwhelm her? Arriving at the cafe, Sarah took a deep breath before stepping inside. The familiar aroma of coffee and baked goods enveloped her, providing a sense of comfort amidst her anxiety. She spotted Adrian sitting at a table in the corner, his posture tense as he glanced at his phone. Sarah approached slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Adrian. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Sarah, thank you for coming. She nodded, her expression guarded. Let's get to it, shall we? Adrian cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize for what I said the other day. It was unacceptable, and I've been reflecting on it. Sarah crossed her arms, studying him closely. Reflection is a good start, but it's not enough. You need to understand the impact of your words. I know, he replied, his voice earnest. I've spoken to some people about it, and I realize I've been blind to my own privilege. I want to change. Sarah raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. Change is a process, Adrian. It requires more than just words. It demands action. He nodded, his expression sincere. I want to be involved in the training sessions. I believe it could help me understand better. Sarah felt a flicker of hope, but it was accompanied by caution. Was he truly ready to confront his biases? If you're serious about this, then I'm willing to give you a chance, she said finally. But you need to acknowledge your privilege and be prepared to listen. Adrian's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he nodded. I understand. I'm ready to learn. They spent the next hour discussing the framework for the training sessions, with Sarah outlining her vision for creating a space that fostered empathy and understanding. Adrian listened intently, asking questions and offering insights, and Sarah found herself surprised by his willingness to engage. As they wrapped up their meeting, Sarah felt a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps this was the beginning of something transformative, not just for Adrian, but for the cafe as well. But as Sarah walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would be fraught with challenges. Change was rarely easy, and she knew that the road ahead would require patience, resilience, and unwavering commitment. As Sarah Reyes walked out of the cafe, she felt a mix of anxiety and hope swirling within her. The conversation with Adrian Vance had been unexpectedly productive, but she knew the real test lay ahead. Change was rarely linear, and both she and Adrian were standing at the precipice of something significant. The following week felt like a whirlwind. Sarah and Adrian met regularly to plan the training sessions, and she was surprised by how engaged he seemed. He asked questions that challenged her to think deeply about her own experiences, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. However, as the training date approached, Sarah noticed that Adrian's demeanor shifted. He seemed more withdrawn, occasionally distracted during their discussions. After a particularly intense planning session, Sarah decided to address it. Adrian, she said, leaning forward in her chair, is everything okay? You seem off. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. To be honest, I'm feeling the pressure. I know I've said I want to change, but I also worry about how people will perceive me. What if they don't believe I'm sincere? Sarah regarded him carefully. Change takes time, and it might not be easy for others to accept your transformation right away. But this isn't just about them. It's about you. You have to be genuine in your desire to learn and grow. Adrian nodded, though his brow furrowed in concern. I get that, but I can't help but think about the backlash. I've built my reputation on being tough and successful. What if people see this as weakness? It's not weakness to acknowledge your flaws, Sarah replied, her voice steady. It takes strength to confront your biases and seek to change. Remember, this training is about creating a safe space for everyone, including you. The conversation lingered in the air, and Sarah could see the internal struggle etched across Adrian's features. She felt a pang of empathy. She knew what it was like to carry the weight of societal expectations. As the day of the training session arrived, the cafe buzzed with anticipation. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding. She had meticulously planned the agenda, incorporating storytelling, role-playing exercises, and discussions about race and privilege. Adrian was seated among the staff, his expression a mix of determination and apprehension. Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders as he prepared to engage with his colleagues. Welcome, everyone, Sarah began, her voice steady. Today we're here to have an open and honest conversation about inclusivity and the impact of our words. The room was filled with nods of agreement, but Sarah could sense the underlying nervousness among the staff. She smiled reassuringly, hoping to create a welcoming atmosphere. To start, I'd like us to share our personal stories. Each of us has experienced moments where our identities shaped how we see the world. Sarah encouraged her colleagues to speak openly, emphasizing the importance of vulnerability in the learning process. One by one, staff members began to share their own experiences with prejudice and discrimination. Sarah listened intently, her heart swelling with pride as her colleagues bravely opened up. The stories ranged from subtle microaggressions to overt racism, and the emotional weight in the room grew palpable. When it was Adrian's turn, Sarah felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. How would he approach this moment? As he stood up, the room fell silent. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," Adrian began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent so much time focused on my own success that I've neglected to see the people around me. I've made comments and decisions based on my privilege without thinking about their impact." Sarah felt a flicker of hope as Adrian continued, sharing a story from his past that revealed his own insecurities. "There was a time when I was just starting out in business, and I felt so insecure about my place in the world. I made a joke at the expense of someone who worked for me, thinking it would make me look tough, but looking back, I realized how hurtful that was." Adrian's vulnerability resonated with the room, and Sarah could see her colleagues shifting in their seats, their expressions softening. "I've been working with Sarah to learn and understand these issues better," he concluded, his voice trembling slightly. "I know I have a long way to go, but I'm committed to doing better." A wave of applause erupted from the staff, and Sarah felt a surge of pride for both Adrian and her colleagues. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the beginning of change. Following Adrian's sharing, Sarah introduced the role-playing exercises, aiming to provide practical scenarios that highlighted the complexities of race and privilege. The room buzzed with energy as staff members broke into small groups, engaging in discussions and acting out different situations. Sarah moved from group to group, offering guidance and support. She was impressed by how engaged everyone was, particularly Adrian, who actively participated and asked insightful questions. However, as the afternoon wore on, Sarah noticed a shift in the atmosphere. A group of staff members was gathered in a corner, whispering among themselves. Sarah felt a sense of unease wash over her. Curiosity piqued, she approached the group. "Is everything all right?" One of the newer employees, a young woman named Tasha, looked up, her expression conflicted. "We were just discussing Adrian's comments. I'm glad he's trying to change, but it feels a bit insincere." Sarah's heart sank. She had anticipated that some staff members might feel skeptical about Adrian's transformation. "I understand your concerns, but change is a process. It's important to give him a chance to prove himself," Sarah said softly. Tasha nodded, but Sarah could see the skepticism in her eyes. "I get that, but it's hard to forget how he used to be. It feels like he's just trying to save face." The conversation continued, and Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She couldn't deny that change would take bounding, but she also believed in the power of growth and redemption. As the training session wrapped up, Sarah felt a mix of triumph and uncertainty. They had made significant progress, but there were still hurdles to overcome. She hoped that Adrian would continue to engage with the staff and demonstrate his commitment to change. Later that evening, Sarah received a text from Adrian. "Thank you for today. I appreciate your guidance. I know I still have a lot to learn." Sarah smiled at the message, feeling a sense of camaraderie with him. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Adrian but for the cafe as well. As she prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on the day's events. Change was rarely easy, but it was a necessary part of growth. She was determined to see this journey through, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The weeks following the first training session were a whirlwind of activity at the cafe. Sarah Reyes found herself immersed in the work, facilitating discussions, mediating conflicts, and encouraging her colleagues to embrace the ongoing process of growth and understanding. The initial skepticism towards Adrian Vance's involvement had begun to dissipate, replaced by a cautious curiosity. He had actively participated in the subsequent training sessions, demonstrating a genuine willingness to learn and engage with the difficult conversations about race and privilege. He even started showing up early to help Sarah set up, a small gesture that spoke volumes about his commitment. One afternoon, as Sarah was preparing for another training session, she received a call from Maya, her daughter. Sarah hesitated before answering, a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Their relationship had been strained lately, with Maya expressing concerns about Sarah's age and the demanding nature of her work at the cafe. "Hello, Maya," Sarah answered cautiously. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come over later?" Maya's voice was tense, and Sarah knew this wasn't just a casual check-in. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" "I'll tell you when you get here," Maya replied before hanging up. Sarah sighed, a wave of apprehension washing over her. She loved her daughter dearly, but their conversations often felt like a battlefield, with Maya constantly questioning her choices and urging her to slow down. Sarah knew Maya worried about her, but she also felt a deep need to continue her work at the cafe. It had become more than just a job. It was a mission, a way to make a difference in the world. Pushing aside her anxieties, Sarah focused on the task at hand. She gathered the materials for the training session, arranging them meticulously on the table. Today's topic was microaggressions, and Sarah had prepared several scenarios to illustrate how seemingly harmless comments could perpetuate harmful stereotypes. As the staff began to arrive, Sarah greeted them with a warm smile, hoping to create a welcoming environment. Adrian was among the first to arrive, his expression a mix of determination and nervousness. He had confided in Sarah about the challenges he faced, grappling with his own internalized biases and the pressure to maintain his image within his social circle. "Ready for another round?" Adrian asked, a hint of self-deprecating humor in his voice. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah replied, returning his smile. "Today's topic is a tricky one, but I think it's crucial for us to understand how microaggressions can perpetuate harm." The training session began, and Sarah guided the staff through various scenarios, encouraging them to identify the subtle ways in which bias could manifest in everyday interactions. The discussions were lively and thought-provoking, with staff members sharing their own experiences and perspectives. Adrian actively participated, offering insights and challenging his colleagues to think critically about their own behavior. However, as the session progressed, Sarah noticed a growing tension between Adrian and one of the newer employees, Tasha. Tasha had been vocal about her skepticism towards Adrian's transformation, questioning his sincerity and motivations. During a role-playing exercise, Tasha challenged Adrian directly, accusing him of performative allyship. "It's easy for you to apologize and say you want to change," Tasha said, her voice sharp. "But what are you actually doing to dismantle the systems that perpetuate these inequalities?" Adrian bristled at her words, his defensiveness rising to the surface. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm engaging with these conversations, trying to learn and grow. What more do you want from me?" The room fell silent, the tension palpable as the other staff members watched the exchange unfold. Sarah stepped in, hoping to mediate the conflict. "Tasha, I understand your frustration," Sarah said calmly. "But it's important to remember that change takes time. Adrian is on a journey, and we need to support him in that process." "But how do we know it's genuine?" Tasha countered, her voice laced with skepticism. "How do we know he's not just doing this for show?" Sarah turned to Adrian, her expression encouraging. "Adrian, can you share with us some of the concrete steps you've taken to address these issues outside of these training sessions?" Adrian took a deep breath, his gaze meeting Tasha's. "I've been working with a local organization that supports underprivileged communities. I've also made a commitment to diversify my company's hiring practices and create opportunities for people from marginalized backgrounds." Tasha listened intently, her expression softening slightly. "That's good to hear," she said, her tone less accusatory. "But actions speak louder than words. We need to see sustained effort, not just performative gestures." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Accountability is crucial," she said, addressing the entire group. "We all need to hold ourselves accountable for our actions and continue to challenge our biases." The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of shared responsibility. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that this difficult conversation could lead to meaningful change. As the training session concluded, Sarah approached Tasha, wanting to address her concerns directly. "Tasha, I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to challenge us all to do better." "Thanks, Sarah," Tasha replied. "I just want to make sure we're creating real change, not just surface-level solutions." Sarah smiled, admiring Tasha's passion and commitment. "I agree, and I believe we can achieve that if we work together." As the staff dispersed, Sarah felt a sense of exhaustion wash over her. The emotional intensity of the training sessions was taking its toll, and she longed for a moment of peace. But as she prepared to leave, she received a text from the cafe manager. "Can you stop by my office for a quick chat?" Sarah sighed, her heart sinking. She hoped this wasn't bad news. She made her way to the manager's office, her mind racing with possibilities. "Sarah, thanks for coming in," the manager said, his expression serious. "I've received some feedback about the training sessions, and, well, it's mixed." Sarah's stomach churned. "Mixed? What kind of feedback?" "Some staff members feel that the sessions are too focused on race and not enough on other forms of diversity and inclusion," the manager explained. "They feel like their experiences aren't being represented." Sarah frowned, surprised by this perspective. "But we've discussed various forms of diversity, including gender, sexual orientation, and disability. I've tried to create a space where everyone feels comfortable sharing their experiences." "I know you have," the manager said, his key unsympathetic. "But some people feel like the focus on race is overshadowing other important issues. They want to see a more balanced approach." Sarah felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had worked tirelessly to create a safe and inclusive environment, and the thought that her efforts were being misinterpreted stung. But she also recognized the validity of the feedback. It was important to address all forms of diversity and ensure that everyone felt represented. "I understand," Sarah said, her voice measured. "I'll consider how to incorporate a more balanced approach in future sessions." The manager nodded, relieved by her willingness to adapt. "Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your flexibility." As Sarah left the manager's office, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She had taken on a challenging task, and she knew that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. But she was also determined to see it through, to create a space where everyone felt valued and respected. The next training session loomed over Sarah like a storm cloud as she contemplated the feedback from the manager. She understood the need for a balanced approach, but reconciling the various forms of diversity within the context of race was a challenge she hadn't anticipated. The pressure weighed heavily on her, but she was determined not to shy away from the task. On the day of the session, Sarah arrived early at the cafe, her mind racing with ideas. She had spent hours crafting a new agenda that incorporated various aspects of diversity, gender, sexual orientation, and disability, while still addressing the core issues of race and privilege. She wanted to ensure everyone felt seen and heard. As she set up the room, Adrian walked in, his expression curious. "You look deep in thought," he remarked, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm just trying to find the right balance for today's session," Sarah replied, turning to face him. "I received some feedback about focusing too much on race, and I want to make sure everyone feels included." Adrian nodded, a contemplative look crossing his face. "That makes sense. It's important to recognize all the different facets of identity. I appreciate that you're listening to the team." Sarah felt a flicker of gratitude for Adrian's support. "Thanks, Adrian. I hope today goes smoothly. I want to create an atmosphere where everyone feels comfortable sharing." As the other staff members began to arrive, Sarah greeted them warmly, trying to set a positive tone. She could sense the underlying tension in the air, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, and about how the session would unfold. When everyone settled into their seats, Sarah took a deep breath and began. "Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to explore the many facets of diversity and how they intersect," she started, her voice steady. "I want us to engage in an open dialogue about our experiences and how we can all contribute to fostering a more inclusive environment." She introduced a series of activities designed to encourage sharing and discussion. They began with a diversity wheel exercise, where each staff member would identify aspects of their identity and share how those identities influence their experiences. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she watched the staff engage with the exercise. As the discussions unfolded, Sarah noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Staff members began to share their personal stories, stories of being marginalized due to their gender, sexual orientation, and backgrounds. The room filled with laughter, tears, and moments of vulnerability. Adrian contributed as well, sharing a story about his own struggles with the expectations placed upon him as a wealthy businessman. "I've often felt pressure to conform to a certain image, but it's not always who I am," he said, his voice earnest. "I've learned that being authentic is essential, even if it means challenging the status quo." Tasha, who had been skeptical of Adrian's intentions in the past, listened attentively. When it was her turn, she spoke about her experiences as a queer woman and the challenges she faced in both her personal and professional life. "It's hard to be seen as more than just a label," she admitted. "I want my colleagues to understand that our identities are complex, and we shouldn't be reduced to stereotypes." Sarah watched as the group engaged with one another, their conversations becoming more animated and meaningful. It was a relief to see the staff embracing the topic with openness. As they moved on to the next activity, an exercise focused on microaggressions, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. "Now let's discuss microaggressions and how they manifest in everyday interactions," Sarah said, guiding them through various scenarios. "I want us to think critically about the words we use and how they can impact others." As they role-played different situations, it became apparent that some staff members still struggled with recognizing their own biases. Sarah called on a few volunteers to act out a scenario where one person made an offhand comment that belittled another's experience. Tasha stepped up, and as she played her part, her expression shifted from frustration to empathy. "It's important to acknowledge that even when we don't intend to offend, our words can still hurt," she said, her voice filled with conviction. Adrian chimed in. "That's a crucial point. I've been guilty of making jokes without thinking about their implications. It's a learning process." As the conversations deepened, Sarah felt a sense of hope blossom within her. They were making progress, and the staff was beginning to understand the complexities of diversity and inclusion. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still work to be done. Toward the end of the session, Sarah decided to open the floor for feedback on their discussions. "I want to hear your thoughts. What did you find valuable, and what can we improve?" Tasha raised her hand, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate that we're discussing different aspects of diversity, but I think we also need to confront the uncomfortable truths about systemic racism. We can't shy away from those conversations." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the importance of Tasha's input. "Absolutely. It's crucial that we continue to address those issues head-on. We can't create a truly inclusive environment without confronting the reality of systemic oppression." Adrian leaned in, his expression earnest. "I agree. It's easy to talk about diversity in a general sense, but we need to dig deeper and address the root causes of inequality." The room buzzed with agreement, and Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. They were willing to engage with the difficult topics, and that was a significant step forward. As the session concluded, Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. They had tackled challenging subjects and opened up important dialogues, but she also recognized that this was just the beginning. There was still much work to be done. After the session, Sarah approached Adrian, who was packing up his materials. "Thank you for your contributions today. You really engaged with the topics." "Thanks, Sarah. I'm trying to be better," Adrian replied, with a hint of vulnerability. "But I know I still have a long way to go." "We all do," Sarah said, her voice encouraging. "The important thing is that we're willing to learn and grow together." As Sarah prepared to leave for the day, her phone buzzed with another message from Maya. "Can we talk tonight?" Feeling a mix of dread and determination, Sarah replied, "Sure, I'll come over after work." The conversation with Maya weighed heavily on her mind. She loved her daughter, but she also felt a deep desire to prove that she was capable and strong, still able to make a difference in the world. As she drove to Maya's house later that evening, Sarah reflected on the day's events. While she felt hopeful about the progress being made at the cafe, she also recognized that her personal life required attention. The tension with Maya had been building for far too long, and it was time to address it. Arriving at Maya's home, Sarah took a deep breath before stepping inside. The atmosphere was tense, and she could sense the unease in the air. Maya greeted her with a tight smile, leading her to the living room where they could talk privately. "Thanks for coming, Mom," Maya said, her voice softer than usual. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. Maya took a seat, her expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about you and your work at the cafe. I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." Sarah felt a pang of frustration. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm doing what I love. I want to make a difference in the world." "But at what cost?" Maya pressed, her tone rising slightly. "You're pushing yourself too hard, and I worry you're going to burn out." Sarah sighed, feeling the familiar tension between them resurfacing. Maya, I'm capable of handling this. I've been doing this work for years. It's important to me. Maya shook her head, her voice filled with concern. I get that, but I just want you to know that it's okay to slow down. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. The conversation spiraled into a heated discussion, with both women expressing their frustrations and fears. Sarah felt torn between her desire to continue her work and her daughter's concern for her well-being. As they argued, Sarah realized that this was not just about her work. It was about the generational divide between them, the differing perspectives on life and purpose. I want you to understand that my work is my passion, Sarah said, her voice firm. I'm not just doing it for me, I'm doing it for the community, for people who need support. As Sarah walked out of the cafe, her mind buzzed with possibilities. She had witnessed a transformation today, not just in her own interactions, but in how the cafe staff and patrons related to one another. It was a reminder that change often began with a single conversation, a willingness to listen, and the courage to be vulnerable. Over the next few days, Sarah continued to advocate for inclusivity within the cafe. She collaborated with Tasha to develop a series of community events aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding. They brainstormed ideas for workshops and discussion panels, inviting local speakers to share their experiences and perspectives. Each event would be an opportunity for patrons and staff alike to engage in meaningful conversations about race, gender, and social justice. However, as they began organizing the first event, Sarah sensed pushback from some staff members. Not everyone was on board with the changes. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for the upcoming workshop with Tasha in a quiet corner of the cafe, Tyler, a longtime server, approached them, his expression skeptical. "What's with all this talk about diversity and inclusion?" Tyler asked, crossing his arms defensively. "Aren't we already doing fine? Why do we need to change anything?" Sarah felt a familiar tension rise within her, but she knew this was a crucial moment. "It's not about saying we're doing fine," she replied calmly. "It's about recognizing that we can always improve. Creating a welcoming environment for everyone is an ongoing process." "But it feels like we're being forced to cater to everyone's feelings," Tyler shot back. "What about our feelings?" Tasha stepped in, her tone firm but friendly. "Tyler, this isn't just about feelings. It's about creating a space where everyone, regardless of their background, can feel safe and respected. We're not trying to undermine anyone, we're trying to uplift everyone." The tension hung thick in the air, and Sarah could see Tyler wavering. "I get that, but it feels like we have to walk on eggshells all the time. What if we just treat people like people?" Sarah nodded, recognizing the validity of his concerns. "That's exactly what we're trying to do, Tyler. But we have to acknowledge that not everyone has the same experiences. For some, just being treated like a normal person means overcoming barriers that others might not see." Tyler hesitated, clearly grappling with the complexity of the issue. "I guess I just don't want to feel like I'm being accused of something I didn't do." Sarah softened her tone. "No one is accusing you, Tyler. We're all learning together. The goal is to create a dialogue, not to point fingers. We can grow as a team, and that will benefit everyone." After a moment, Tyler uncrossed his arms, his posture relaxing slightly. "All right, I'm willing to listen, but I can't promise I'll agree with everything." "That's all we ask," Sarah replied, relieved to see some progress. "Let's keep the lines of communication open." As they continued planning the first community event, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. They decided to hold a discussion panel featuring local activists and community leaders, aiming to encourage dialogue about social justice and inclusivity. Tasha took the lead in reaching out to potential speakers, while Sarah focused on promoting the event. Days turned into a week, and finally, the day of the event arrived. The cafe was buzzing with energy, the walls adorned with colorful flyers promoting the panel discussion. Sarah stood at the entrance, greeting attendees with a smile, her heart racing with anticipation. She hoped the event would foster the open dialogue she envisioned. As the panel began, Sarah introduced the speakers, who shared their experiences with social injustice and the importance of community engagement. The audience listened intently, engaged in discussions that challenged their perceptions and prompted reflection. Sarah's heart swelled as she looked around the room, seeing patrons from various backgrounds laughing, sharing, and connecting. This was what she had hoped for, a space where people could come together to learn from one another. However, not everyone was as receptive. During the Q&A portion, a familiar voice piped up from the back of the room. It was the man from the cafe who had dismissed the idea of inclusivity a week earlier. "I still don't see why this is necessary," he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "It feels like we're being forced to believe things we don't agree with." Sarah felt a pang of disappointment, but knew she had to address the concern. "It's not about forcing beliefs," she replied, her voice steady. "It's about understanding different perspectives and creating a space where everyone feels valued. We're not asking you to abandon your beliefs. We're inviting you to consider the experiences of others." The audience murmured in agreement, but Sarah could see that the man remained unconvinced. He continued to press the issue, challenging the speakers and dismissing their experiences. As the tension mounted, Tasha stepped forward, her voice firm. "I understand where you're coming from, but I think you're missing the point. It's not about invalidating your beliefs. It's about recognizing that other people's experiences are just as valid. We all have our stories, and we can learn from each other." The man scoffed but fell silent, clearly taken aback by Tasha's assertiveness. Sarah felt a surge of pride for her colleague. Tasha had come a long way, and it was empowering to see her stand up for what was right. As the discussion continued, Sarah felt optimistic. Despite the pushback, the overall atmosphere was one of growth and understanding. Attendees asked questions, shared their stories, and engaged in respectful dialogue. Sarah couldn't help but smile. This was the change she had envisioned. After the panel, people lingered, mingling and discussing the topics that had been raised. Sarah moved through the crowd, engaging with attendees and encouraging further conversation. She spotted the man who had challenged the panel earlier, speaking quietly with another attendee. "Hey there," Sarah said, approaching him. "I appreciate your willingness to engage in this discussion." He looked up, his expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I didn't mean to be so confrontational earlier," he admitted. "It's just hard for me to wrap my head around some of this." "That's okay," Sarah replied, her tone understanding. "It's a complex issue, and it takes time to process. The important thing is that you're here and willing to listen." He nodded, and Sarah could see a shift in his demeanor. "I'll try to be more open-minded," he said, a hint of sincerity in his voice. As Sarah walked away, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Change was happening, slowly but surely, and she was proud to be a part of it. But as the evening wound down and patrons began to exit, Sarah noticed Tasha standing off to the side, her expression troubled. Sarah approached her, concern etched across her face. "Hey, are you okay?" Sarah asked gently. Tasha looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I thought today would be a turning point for everyone, but I still feel like some people just don't get it." "It's a process," Sarah reassured her. "Change doesn't happen overnight. The important thing is that we've started the conversation." Tasha nodded, but Sarah could sense the weight of disappointment in her posture. "I just want to make a difference," she admitted. "I don't want to go back to how things were." Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Tasha's shoulder. "You're already making a difference. Every time you stand up for inclusivity, you're creating ripples of change. It's not easy, but you've got the heart for it." As they stood together, Sarah felt a surge of determination. They were in this together, and with each conversation, each event, they were paving the way for a more inclusive future. In the weeks that followed, the cafe continued to evolve, becoming a hub of inclusivity and open dialogue. Sarah and Tasha's efforts had paid off, as the community events and training sessions fostered a growing sense of understanding and respect among the staff and patrons. Drin, once a symbol of resistance, had become a dedicated ally, using his influence and resources to support the cafe's initiatives. He regularly attended the community events, engaging in thoughtful discussions and lending his voice to the cause. Sarah watched with pride as he continued to challenge his own biases and encourage others to do the same. The cafe's transformation was not without its challenges, however. There were still pockets of resistance, with some staff members and patrons struggling to embrace the changes. But Sarah and her colleagues remained steadfast, recognizing that progress often came in small, incremental steps. As Sarah stood behind the counter, serving customers with a warm smile, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The cafe had become more than just a business. It was a testament to the power of community and the transformative potential of open dialogue. Sarah knew that their journey was far from over, but she was filled with hope. With each passing day, the cafe was becoming a beacon of inclusivity, a place where people from all walks of life could come together, learn from one another, and create a better future. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.